I used to think love and paperwork were separate planets. You keep the feelings in the kitchen, the documents in a drawer, and you only let them touch when taxes come around. That illusion held until the day I realized my marriage was a form I'd signed for someone else's future. I met Anya on a Thursday in Back Bay, volunteering at an ESL conversation circle. The library runs for recent arrivals. I liked it because it was practical. You watch someone's vocabulary grow the way a plant pushes another leaf, and your own loneliness gets tricked into feeling useful. She walked in late in a yellow coat, apologized for the door, and sat next to me like a decision I'd already made. From the start, she made English look like jewelry, pretty, a little dangerous, worn with intent. We started getting coffee after the group and then accidentally walking toward the same subway stop. She laughed easily, learned fast, and touched my forearm when she wanted me to agree in a way that made agreeing look like my idea. Anya is from Kharkiv. The first time she said home, she didn't point to a map. She showed me a photo of her grandmother making vareniki in a kitchen with melting wallpaper. She had the kind of resilience that gets called beauty until you notice it doesn't always look good in photos. I'm a software guy who writes code for a hospital scheduling system, which means my life is organizing other people's chaos and pretending it's math. I don't have a dramatic backstory. I have a cat named Pepper and a lease I signed because the windows made winter look like a thing you could forgive. The speed made sense at the time. She needed basics, a bank account, a phone plan, an apartment that didn't steal deposits. I needed a reason to stop being a man whose primary relationship was with a microwave. We were both a little tired of trying to convince our friends we had a plan. We got married at City Hall on a Friday with a bouquet from a corner bodega and a judge who had a voice like a good elevator. Her friends came. Mine came. After, we ate cake at a cafe that believed in butter, and I watched her face relax like maybe the room had agreed to stop shaking for a minute. People will tell you not to marry fast. They are right, and they are boring, and also sometimes you do it because saying no to something that feels like it's saving you requires a kind of patience I didn't have. The first time immigration turned our kitchen into a desk, I took the morning off and spread out the forms like we were building a ship. I-130, I-485, I-765, the alphabet pretending to be a staircase. We stacked evidence, joint lease, joint bank account, photos with our friends where we looked like the idea of a couple. Anya's smile for the pictures was a little too performative, but so was mine. That's what paperwork does. It edits you into your own PR. The adjustment of status interview was mostly anticlimax. The officer had the manner of a high school vice principal who knows who's selling vape pens and isn't mad about it, just tired. He asked how we met. I told him about the conversation circle and the yellow coat. He asked Anya my favorite food. She said shakshuka, which was correct and cute. He asked if we planned on children. Anya said, yes, but not yet. We need to make money first, which earned us a nod from the god of office chairs. He stamped something, gently lectured us about the 2-year conditional green card, and told us to update our address if we moved. We left feeling like we'd passed a test that no one we loved could grade. Conditional. I didn't think about that word much at the time. In practice, it means you're married, but, to the government at least, your marriage is on probation. After 2 years, you file a joint petition to remove conditions, I-751, and if no one has changed their mind or died or disappeared, the probation lifts. It's not romantic, but then neither is car insurance, and we still buy that. The first hairline crack appeared as something I would have called cultural if I'd still been drunk on myth. Anya didn't like being photographed with my family. She smiled for their iPhones like a waitress who knows the tip is already on the bill. She did her own laundry at odd hours, claimed my detergent made her itch, and kept a suitcase half-packed by the closet for emergencies, which is either prudent or theatrical depending on the week. She took weekend trips to New York to spoon her homesickness with a community that spoke her language and ate food that tasted like memory. It made sense. Your body needs a place where you aren't new. The longer we lived together, the more her phone became the most interesting person in the room. She used Telegram and Viber more than text. She would answer video calls on the balcony, no matter the weather, and I would hear her switch to Ukrainian like changing into a dress you only wear around certain people. I don't speak it, and I didn't ask her to translate everything because people need oxygen. But sometimes a laugh has a name in it, and sometimes it doesn't, and lately, all her laughs were acquiring syllables from somewhere else. There was a cousin Dima who came up a lot. She said he was in Toronto doing logistics, which is a job that always sounds fake until you care about shipping rates. She showed me photos of him holding her niece in a kitchen that wasn't as depressed as the first one. When Dima came to visit Boston for business, he stayed with a friend, not us, because our place is small, which is true if you are allergic to intimacy. When we met him for dinner, he hugged Anya too long for cousin, but I'm American and full of puritanical guesses, and I told myself to be a grown-up and let the Eastern European Affection Index recalibrate my face. Money got weird right before taxes. Tiny the way plumbing is, tiny until your ceiling falls. She asked to be taken off our joint credit card because I don't like how banks track me, then put 3 large purchases through a no-name app I'd never seen. Plain Go, some budget outfit my bank flagged as travel services. She shrugged. Bought tickets for my girlfriends, she said. They will pay me cash. A month later, rent was due and she forgot her half, which she paid 2 days later in a nervous wad. I remember thinking, this is how people rehearse theft. They start with little lies to build muscle. The second hairline crack was a ring, not hers, mine. I noticed she had a tan line on her left ring finger that didn't match our timeline. It was the thinnest stripe, the kind a simple band makes when summer tries to eat your jewelry. She saw me see it, put her hand in her pocket and said, "My aunt gave me a ring years ago. I wore it always, too quickly." I kissed her palm and said nothing because if you point at every exit in a theater, you never sit down. We made it to the first anniversary. We ate cake again because we are the kind of people who use sugar to tell time. The conditional card arrived in the mail with her photo, darker than she is in the kitchen light. 2 years started to feel like a thing we could survive. Then the war in Ukraine escalated in a way that turned Anya's phone into a siren. She cried on the couch and I held her and watched men my age carry their mothers across streets, cratered in ways that rearranged my entire understanding of not dying. Anya started organizing fundraisers, and I loved her more for it, the part of her that makes emergencies smaller for other people. That's why when she started making quick trips to Toronto to see Dima and get documents, I didn't suspect. Cross-border family logistics are complicated in the best of times, and these were not. The third trip, she came back with a Canadian SIM card and new luggage and a kind of relief that looked a lot like someone else's bed. She told me about paperwork at the Ukrainian consulate, and I nodded because sometimes your job is to be a wall and let the other person throw words at you until they hit the floor. The I-751 crept up like a dental appointment. "We should start collecting things," I said. "Joint bills, tax returns, photos." She said, and went very busy in ways that avoided files. I made a folder on my desktop named Lyft, which is how I tricked myself into doing chores. I put our lease renewals there, our bank statements, 2 utility bills, and a photo of us at a July barbecue where she is kissing my cheek like a marketing intern pretending to be human. She started needing privacy for calls with the lawyer about my papers. I asked if we should go together. She said the lawyer's office is small and Zoom is easier, and could I please just email the mortgage statements and not make everything a conference. She began referring to the I-751 as my case, which is accurate and not depending on what you think marriage is. The tipping point came disguised as benevolence. I came home early to surprise her with dumplings from the place on Brighton that likes butter almost as much as we do. Her laptop was open on the coffee table, a draft email on the screen addressed to Atney Nina, subject, waiver packet. The body said, "Per your advice, I'm preparing my I-751 waiver without spouse. I have affidavits from friends re, his emotional distance, and my fear." Attached are photos, no bruises. Also attaching notarized lease for Toronto, apt in case they ask about stability. You know the feeling when your body takes a step back from your life so it can see the whole painting? That. My name was in the next paragraph. He checks my phone. He is very controlling about money. He will retaliate if he knows I'm applying without him. I put the dumplings down and read it again because sometimes your brain needs to see the words twice to file them under the right folder. There is a legitimate reason to file a waiver without your spouse. If the marriage was entered in good faith but ended in divorce, or if the U.S. citizen spouse abused you, or if there are extreme circumstances. Those are the rules, because sometimes people are terrible. But my wife was constructing a version of us in which I played the villain so she could graduate from probation without me. She was pre-writing affidavits for friends to sign like party invitations with lines to fill in. There was an attachment icon. a PDF named Zags 2018, Kharkiv, JEGS. UKAS is the civil registry office in Ukraine. Apostille means certified for international use. I clicked. It was a Ukrainian marriage certificate, names in Cyrillic. One of them was Anya, the other was not me. My body did a very adult thing. It did not throw anything. It did not wake the building. It took a screenshot, closed the laptop exactly to where it had been, and sat on the floor petting the cat until the room returned from whatever universe it had just visited. When Anya came home, she was all softness and soup, and oh my God, I had such a long day. I handed her a dumpling, breathed like the stove, and said nothing about the word waiver. We watched a show where people in sweaters solve crimes with kindness. I brushed her hair absent-mindedly while an alternate timeline played in my head where I stood up and said, "Tell me about 2018," and she either cried into my shirt with relief or moved into the second bedroom with contempt. I didn't pick either. I went to bed and did not sleep, and when the bird outside our window started practicing for spring, I made coffee and opened a new folder named Nouns. I booked a consult with an immigration attorney who looks like the kind of person you'd trust with your dog in your last 10 minutes. His name was Kavish. He listened while I put the facts on his desk the way a man puts down pieces of a broken chair. He didn't blink at the zags. "Bigamy happens more than you think," he said. "Not like gossip, but like an X-ray. Sometimes it's ignorance of process. Sometimes it's a strategy. Either way, USCIC cares a lot because it speaks to credibility and intent. And if she's preparing a waiver alleging abuse, your best friend is paper." "I don't want to ruin her life," I said, which is a sentence you say when you are not quite ready to admit your life has been a prop. "You don't need to ruin anything," he said. "You need to stop being a launching pad for a lie. There's a difference." He told me to get copies of whatever I could without breaking laws. He told me to document everything and to stop texting anything emotionally expensive. He told me to pull my credit and freeze it, because when people get bold with immigration narratives, they sometimes get bold with banks. He told me to move half the money in our joint into my own checking account and then leave the joint alone for household bills. "Judges like boring," he said. "Be boring." I went to the Massachusetts Vital Records site and ordered a copy of our marriage certificate because I wanted it in the folder. I downloaded bank statements. I printed the HOA email confirming our parking spot because my brain is soothing itself with administrative chores when I'm scared. I wrote down the dates Anya had been in Toronto and cross-referenced them with charges to Plane Go and with Instagram stories where she geotagged cafes and neighborhoods of a city I've never visited. I'm not proud of that sentence, and I do not regret it. I also did something that is either the worst or best decision I've made as an adult. I called the Ukrainian consulate and asked in slow, careful English what the process would be to verify a Zag's marriage for use in the U.S. immigration proceeding. The woman on the phone had an accent like a grandmother who has no time for your nonsense and also wants you to eat. "You will need a apostille already," she said. "If you have apostille, you have marriage. We do not issue fake apostille. You bring copy. We stamp affidavit for your lawyer." I thanked her and hung up and stared at the cat, who blinked like she had known all along. That night, Anya came to bed late. She smelled like winter and a perfume I hadn't bought. I said nothing. The next morning, I told her a half-truth. "Work's a mess," I said. "I'm going to crash in the second bedroom this week until I get through the deploy." She kissed my forehead and said, "Of course, you need rest," in a tone that sounded like relief. In the past, distance had been a storm to be negotiated. Now it was a path someone had cleared for us. Which is how you know you're not in the same story anymore. She left for Toronto on a Tuesday with a small suitcase and a coat that made her look like she refuses to be cold. I watched the dot on Find My move to Logan and then turn off like a stage light. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a short, precise letter to USCIS withdrawing my support from any joint petition to remove conditions on Anya's residency and requesting that, if a waiver petition were filed alleging abuse, the service consider the attached documents contradicting that narrative. I attached the screenshot of the draft email, a copy of the ZAGS certificate, and a letter from Kavish stating that I had consulted and that further evidence would be forthcoming via his office. I did not editorialize. I did not write about betrayal or soup or the yellow coat. I also wrote an email to Anya, not a manifesto. 5 sentences. I said I would no longer be participating in her case. I said I had retained counsel. I said any further communication about immigration would go through him. I said I hoped she was safe. I said the rent was paid through the month. She replied an hour later with a paragraph that tried on several tones: wounded, indignant, tired before settling on incredulous. Are you serious? She wrote. You know what my family is going through and you choose this? You want to be man who calls the government on his wife? Because you cannot handle that I am independent? I filed waiver because you are cold. You count everything. I am not your project. I did not respond. I forwarded it to Cavish and went for a walk along the Charles where the wind pretends it has opinions about your bone structure. When I came back, I found a new email from a name I didn't know, Nina Esk. Subject, your interference. The body accused me of weaponizing immigration, of retaliating, and of endangering a vulnerable immigrant woman with war trauma. The CC line included Anya. The BCC line, I assume, included whatever story Nina tells herself when a client can write the word apostille without asking how to spell it. Cavish's reply was so clean, it made me wish I could live in his head. Please direct all further communication to my office. Mr. Hale has a right to withdraw support from any petition that would purport to be joint when the marriage is no longer viable. Any allegation of abuse will be met with documentary evidence of the contrary, including evidence of a pre-existing, still valid foreign marriage. Given your admission of a waiver filing, we will also notify USCIS Fraud Detection and National Security, FD&S, of the potential bigamy and misrepresentation. Kindly govern yourself accordingly. He CC'd me and attached a PDF stamped Notice of Representation. I slept in my own bed that night because at some point you stop staging your life for someone who isn't in the room. The next morning, a letter slid under our door like a tired mouse. It was from our building's management, a copy of a lease application for a one-bedroom on the 8th floor. Applicant Anya. Co-signer Dimitro Toronto. The notes section read, applicant's spouse will not be on lease. I took a photo. I added it to nouns. Then I took Pepper to the vet because life continues even in the middle of an audit. 2 days later, there was a knock. Not dramatic, administrative. 2 people stood there with badges that said USCIS officer and a politeness that could survive a hurricane. We're conducting a site visit relating to a petition filed by your spouse, one said. Do you have a few minutes? I let them in. I offered water. I showed them the second bedroom where I had been, sleeping for the deploy, and the closet where Anya keeps her winter things that are more Toronto than Boston. They asked where my spouse was. I said travel and handed them Cavish's letter and my packet. They took it without the theater you might expect, just paper going to live with other paper. The taller officer paused at a photo on our bookshelf, City Hall, the yellow coat, my hand on her waist, and said quietly, I see, which is a sentence that contains entire philosophies if you let it. When they left, I sat on the floor with my back to the door and waited for my heart to stop trying to prove it was still a drummer. Then I stood up, made a sandwich, and wrote down a plan for the part you're probably waiting for, the moment where someone tells the truth with the lights on. It was coming, not because I craved a scene, but because paperwork was about to intersect with a calendar. USCIS had acknowledged receipt of a waiver petition and scheduled an interview. Anya would show up with her lawyer, eyes bright from a night of rehearsing lines about cold husbands and controlling men. I would show up with a folder and a lawyer and a copy of a certificate from a building in Kharkiv where 2 people promised each other a life 4 years before one of them put on a yellow coat and walked into mine. USCIS scheduled the interview for a Wednesday. 9:30 a.m., JFK Federal Building, room number that sounded like an address for a cloud. Kavish and I went early because he believes in arriving before the story does. He wore a tie, the blue of honest sky. I wore the suit I saved for weddings and courts and the kind of funerals where you need your collar to hold you together. Anya arrived at 9:27 with Nina, the lawyer whose emails could cut glass. Anya looked small on purpose, soft sweater, hair down, a face scrubbed clear of anything that could be misread as defiance. She did not look at me. Nina did, the way a person looks at a speed bump they wish was a ramp. A man with a badge opened the door and said my last name like he'd practiced not being bored. Inside, the room was just a table, 2 chairs on one side, 2 on the other, a flag that had seen it all and refused to have opinions, and a camera pointed at a wall like hope. The officer introduced herself as Morales. No humor, no cruelty. The voice of a woman who has watched lies try to knot themselves into truth and learned how to gently cut through rope. She swore us in. She looked at Anya first, because that is how the law sees this posture, the government and the immigrant at the table, the citizen an object with a mouth. Ms. K, you filed a Form I-751 requesting a waiver of the joint filing requirement, Morales said. Basis claimed, good faith marriage that has ended, alternatively, battery or extreme cruelty by your spouse. Do you still assert both? Yes, Anya said, so quietly I almost admired the performance. Morales didn't blink. You also have a pending tip and an FDNS referral regarding a pre-existing foreign marriage, she added, turning a page. Before we ask questions, both counsel should know the file includes a copy of a Ukrainian civil registry certificate with an apostille. We will need clarity on whether that marriage has been terminated. Understood? Nina shifted into her favorite register, indignant huff, wrapped in velvet. Officer, my client fled a war zone. It is not unusual for documentation to be incomplete in such circumstances. It is also not unusual for abusive spouses to weaponize paperwork. We intend to address any alleged certificates in due course. Morales nodded, wrote down due course as if it were a usable noun, and looked at me. Mr. Hale, you submitted a letter withdrawing support for any joint petition and contesting the waiver allegations. You also provided documents. We're going to start with Ms. K, then give you a chance to speak, then we'll see if a recess is useful. You learned the rhythm of a good interview, the way you learn traffic in a new city. Morales built the lane. She asked Anya how we met. Anya said the library. She asked who proposed. Anya said, we decided together. She asked when we stopped living as husband and wife. When he became controlling, Anya said, louder now, he checks my phone. He says what I can buy. He moves money without telling. He always cold. Morales let the last sentence sit between us without touching it. Do you have police reports? She asked. Medical records, shelter intake, photos. No, Nina said smoothly. Not all abuse leaves bruises. True, Morales said evenly. It often does leave paper. If not police paper, then a therapist note, a school counselor, a pastor, a boss, anything. Do you have affidavits? Nina produced 3 typed statements from women. I recognized by first names only, friends from Sunday Shy and Instagram. They were full of adjectives and a few details that felt preloaded. He counts, he asks for receipts, he uses budgets to make rules. If you have ever been in a relationship with a person who reads manuals, you could write a paragraph that sounds like a crime even when it isn't one. Morales read them without giving away whether her face believed them. Were you married before? Morales asked. Anya didn't answer. Nina did. No legally binding marriages in the U.S., she said, lawyerly, which was a sentence hiding its verbs under a coat. Morales didn't sigh. She turned the Zags copy around, the apostille ribbon photocopied into black and gray geometry. Do you recognize this? She asked Anya, voice level. Anya's eyes did what eyes do when a story hits a wall you thought was a door. She glanced at Nina, who nodded minutely, the nod of counsel who knows denial just graduated from useful to perjury. Yes, Anya whispered, but it is not now. It's nothing now. Divorce decree, Morales said. May I see the decree terminating this marriage? It's complicated, Nina said quickly. War interrupts courts. Civil registries are not functioning normally. Morales slid a second page across the table like a librarian dealing in truth. We obtained a record from the Ukrainian Ministry of Justice's electronic registry via consular assistance. The marriage is recorded as valid as of last month. If there is a decree not yet reflected, we need proof. Nina inhaled to perform outrage. Morales moved on like a metronome. Mr. Hale, she said to me, when did you learn of this certificate? The day I saw the draft email to counsel referencing a waiver, I said, keeping it bare. It was attached. I did not rummage. I took a screenshot. I retained counsel and sent it to him. Do you contest that you were controlling in the ways described? She asked. I'm a budget person, I said. I moved money from joint to individual at the advice of my counsel when I learned my spouse was preparing to file without me and might overdraw. I count receipts when a person says they bought plane tickets for friends and rent is late. I don't check phones. I asked for the consent to be processed together. I found out she was preparing affidavits to the contrary. Morales looked at Anya. Who is Dimitro? She asked. My cousin, Anya said, too fast. Morales glanced at a file and back up. The Canadian lease application lists him as co-signer fiancé, she said, without heat. He is also the Ukrainian spouse on the ZAG certificate. Correct. Silence lives 2 lives in small rooms. This one didn't belong to us. It belonged to the camera. Nina tried a new key. Officer, she said softly, my client is trying to leave a marriage that isn't safe. Morales nodded. as if acknowledging that sentence's right to exist. Then she should file what the law gives her, VAWA self-petition with credible evidence, or a good faith marriage waiver with proof the marriage was valid at inception and ended in divorce. What we don't do is treat a still valid prior marriage as a clerical error. We also don't manufacture abuse using adjectives. Ms. K, if you were married to Mr. D at the time of your U.S. marriage, your marriage here may be void for immigration purposes from inception. Anya finally looked at me. It wasn't anger yet. It was the moment a person realizes the map they drew in their head doesn't match the street they're on. Morales asked a few more questions she already knew the answers to, the way you give a person one last chance to fix their mouth. Then she closed the folder. I'm going to issue a notice of intent to deny, she said, based on failure to establish eligibility for the waiver, evidence of a valid pre-existing foreign marriage not shown to be terminated, and lack of credible evidence to support the battery or extreme cruelty claim. You will have 30 days to respond with proof to the contrary. If none, we will deny and refer for rescission and, as appropriate, issuance of a notice to appear in immigration court. This is not an arrest, she added gently. No one is taking you today. Counsel, you know the drill? Nina stood like a woman who has just realized the lobby coffee was never going to be good. We'll respond, she said, because that is a sentence lawyers can always legally say. We left. In the hallway, Anya caught my sleeve. You are happy, she said, in a voice that sounded like she was trying on spite, and it didn't fit. No, I said, I'm steady. There's a difference. On the sidewalk, Kavish exhaled. That went as clean as it could have, he said. FD&S did half my job. Now we wait for paper to do the rest. We didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, the NOID arrived. It might as well have been written in metronome ink. It listed the law. It listed the dates. It cited the bigamy. It cited the site visit. It cited the absence of anything but adjectives in the affidavits. It gave Anya 33 days to produce a decree or a credible explanation that could survive a statute. Kavish drafted a cover letter, attached everything we had, and mailed it with a tracking number that felt like a flashlight through fog. Nina filed a response that read like a closing argument to an audience that would never clap. She included an email from a civil clerk in Kharkiv explaining delay due to war, a sworn statement from Anya about emotional alienation, a letter from a friend who described my soul-going-to-work face like it was a misdemeanor. She did not include a divorce decree. USCIS denied. The letter was less dramatic than gravity. Conditional status terminated, case referred for rescission, NTA forthcoming. The last paragraph had the sentence, people always forget exists. This decision does not preclude the possibility of other forms of relief for which you may be eligible. They meant temporary protected status, asylum, voluntary departure doors that didn't require my name as the doorman. I read it twice. I felt a weird relief I wasn't proud of. I had not asked the government to bury her. I had asked them to stop using my shoulders as her step. The NTA took a month. In that month, Anya moved into the 8th floor one-bedroom with her suitcase that was now an identity. Dimitro arrived from Toronto 3 days out of every 2 weeks because the border has rules his charm can't bend. I saw them once in the elevator, and nobody pretended the air wasn't strange. Her eyes had a new resolve. His face looked like a man who had learned the word consequences in a language that finally stuck. The first master calendar hearing was a 10-minute stanza in the long poem of immigration court. The judge took roll like a stern choir director, set a merits date 6 months out, and told Nina to file any applications for relief by a deadline. Nina filed 2, asylum based on war, and, as backup, TPS because she was eligible as a Ukrainian national. She did not file anything that needed my name. Good. That was the point. Meanwhile, the other kind of paper did its slow dance. We filed for divorce. Massachusetts allows no fault and boring, and I chose both. The only contest was furniture and the cat, and Pepper settled that herself by refusing to leave my lap. We divided things in a way that would make a therapist proud. I take the couch because I bought it. She takes the table because her friend carved it. We sell the lamp because neither of us could agree what it meant. The decree came with a stamp that looked like a small blessing. People imagine karma arrives like a thunderclap. Mostly it comes in letters. Anya's work authorization tied to the marriage case expired. The renewal tied to the waiver died with the waiver. The one tied to asylum took months. Her job at the cafe that believed in butter let her stay on cash and kindness until the payroll software wouldn't look away anymore. The 8th floor landlord posted a notice to quit when the 3rd rent check bounced, and Dimitro's cosigner bravado met a Boston clerk's eyebrows. Nina got TPS filed in time, which gave Anya a new permit and a year. That is not nothing. I was truly glad. Keystone Relief is still relief. The cousin tried a last flourish. He sent me a text the size of a paragraph demanding I retract my false statements to USCIS and threatening to go public, with screenshots making me look like a controlling miser. He attached a photo I'd taken of a budget spreadsheet during the pandemic titled Groceries, which is what he thought control looked like. I sent the message to Kavish, who sent a reply that read, "Cease and desist. Any further contact will be forwarded to FDNS and the U.S. Attorney as witness tampering." The line went quiet. And then the thing I did not expect. Anya wrote me a letter with a pen. Not an email with performative salutations. Paper. She left it under my door at 6 in the morning like a truce. It said 2 truths and a mercy. The truths: she had married Dimitro because they were young and stupid and in love and thought marriage would fix a life that kept breaking. They broke. They never did the hard part with the court because nobody she knew had the money or patience. The mercy: you made me feel like a person who could be good, she wrote. Even when I was busy doing the math about how to be safe. I am sorry I used your name for exit. I did not write back. There was nothing left to say that would not try to make a circle out of a line. But I put the letter in the folder because a record of a person telling the truth about themselves is rare and deserves a safe drawer. The merits hearing came and went like a storm at sea viewed from shore. I did not attend. I didn't need to watch the state and my former wife negotiate a new version of her life. Nina won TPS. Asylum remained pending because war teaches judges to be cautious. The judge did not say her name like a sin. He said it like a name. The court did not throw anybody out of a room. It just reassigned the doors. Months did what months do when you stop feeding them adrenaline. They became days. I learned to like my own kitchen again. I stopped listening for a key that wasn't coming back. I took Pepper on the fire escape and let her glare at pigeons like they'd parked wrong. I ran along the river. I saw a movie alone and did not pretend it was research. I took the extra toothbrush out of the cup and did not narrate it like a tragedy. One Saturday, I went to the library where we'd met. The conversation circle was still there, new faces, a different volunteer leading. A woman from Odessa argued fondly with a man from Sao Paulo about the difference between borrow and lend. A kid in a hoodie practiced the sound of the. I sat in the back and reminded myself that language is not a weapon by default. It becomes one when a person slices with it. After, I walked past the table where Anya and I first weaved a life out of simple verbs. There was a nick on the surface I had never noticed. Every room has scars that don't belong to you. There is a version of this story where I make a speech about immigration, marriage, and the cost of being needed by a person who needs a country more than she needs you. I don't have it. I have what I did. I turned down the volume, built a folder named Nouns, gave it to the rooms that know what to do with facts, and let them do it while I learn not to confuse revenge with relief. As for the karmic coda people always want, a year after the hearing, I got a postcard from Toronto with a skyline so clean it looked like it had been power washed. The handwriting was Anya's. "I am okay," it read. "I am not asking you for anything. He is not my husband now either. This is not a promise that I will become good. It is a promise that I will not use you again." There was a coffee stain in the corner. I did not look up the postal code. I put the card in the folder. 2 months later, on a Sunday morning that smelled like rain and toast, I met someone at the farmer's market while arguing over the correct amount of dill for potatoes. Her name is Sam. She is a nurse who laughs with her whole face. I told her on the second date that I had been a prop in a plan once. She said, "You were a person in a story that got away from both of you," and then she put her hand on mine like a small, sincere contract. It is early, it is good, it is unremarkable in all the ways a life needs to be to withstand government buildings. If you came here for a bow, I don't have one. I have a key card that still opens my office. A cat who now prefers my lap to the back of the couch. A laptop without a folder named Lift, and a stack of documents in a drawer that no longer makes me feel like I am rehearsing a trial. I have a story I tell myself that lands gently. I did not call the government on my wife. I called the government to stop using me as a bridge to a place she was always going to leave me behind in. What would you have done? Would you have signed the joint petition anyway and hoped the marriage learned how to be honest later, or walked away like I did and let paper be the grown-up in the room? Would you have blasted her on the internet with a ZAG certificate or mailed it quietly where it needed to go? Drop your take in the comments. If this one kept you listening, hit like so. It finds the next person staring at a waiver draft they weren't meant to see, and subscribe for more long, messy, true-feeling stories where the twist isn't a villain's mask. It's a file folder, a badge, and a marriage that turned out to be conditional in more ways than one.